Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, From Undecided to Undaunted, How Community Colleges Are Cracking the Code. My name is Karen Gonzalez, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager at the Myers-Briggs company. We have a wonderful group of panelists today that will be discussing how they've cracked the code. But first, I will go through some quick logistics. Today's presentation will run for 1 hour, and we will have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end. All attendees are muted, but please send in your questions through the question function in the webinar controls. If you're having any audio issues, please try using the phone call option if you're using your computer speakers, or try restarting the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sending out a follow-up email that includes the recording. Now, I'm excited to introduce you today to our moderator, Becky Corbin, CEO and President of NACCE. And with that, take it away, Becky.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. It's exciting to be here today. We have people joining us from all over the country, and as I understand, even outside. So it's my pleasure to officially welcome you to the webinar. We appreciate the support of Butte Novice and Myers-Briggs Labs, and we're excited to get things kicked off. And prior to talking a little bit about the topic and how NACCE is aligned in this work, I just wanted to introduce you personally to a little bit about my story. I have been privileged to be the CEO and president of NACCE for the last 5 years, where we've experienced tremendous growth and engagement of over 325 colleges and thousands of people around the country. But prior to that, for 6 years, I served as the vice president of institutional advancement at Rowan College at Burlington County. So my area of the college dealt directly with foundation support, workforce development, and career services. So when I got invited to get involved with this opportunity, I was just thrilled because this is exactly the kind of support that I would have really appreciated having 6 years ago. So I want to jump into the first slide and just share with everyone a little bit about NACCE's purpose. We have many NACCE members on the line with us today, but other colleges and universities that are not affiliated with NACCE. So for some of you, this might be a quick refresher, but for everyone else, I just wanted to remind you that NACCE is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and our sole purpose of being is really to serve members in the higher ed space. So we align with people to work on developing sustainable, scalable resources. So that exactly aligns with what we're doing today. So you can see there our mission, vision, and philosophy, but it's really designed to serve on the campus and in the community. So to go to the next slide, you can see a map of NACCE members. Literally, we are everywhere. And one of the things that we are delighted to do is connect companies to colleges, to engage colleges with each other in co-creating and developing new resources. So when we look and talk about ecosystems, NACCE is one of the largest entrepreneurial ecosystems in the country. And as we move to the next slide, a lot of the teaching and professional development we do in the entrepreneurial space is really focused on getting faculty and administrators and presidents to focus on solving problems through an entrepreneurial mindset. So what we do is we help overcome barriers to innovation, and specifically for college leaders and faculty, for foundations, for corporations, and for policymakers. We view very much problems as opportunities, and that's really what brings us today, which I'll speak a little bit more about the topic. But as we go to the last slide, I just wanted to share both with our members and those who may not be members yet, really our approach to solving problems. So you can see as we go to the next slide, we use the methodology of design thinking. And as I've gotten deeper into this over the years, there are many, many forms of design thinking. You might be most familiar with the Stanford Design School, but there's also other forms of this, design for delight and many of our other processes. But where all of that begins is really with empathy and a sense of knowing who you are and who others are. And I think in terms of communities of practice and the work that we'll do together, that's where the alignment brings us today. So I just want to briefly, as we move to a topic, and I'm going to introduce our speakers, is really talk about cracking the code on enrollment, engagement, persistence, and achievement rates. We're looking at scientific steps that can be used to formulate a deep dive into student awareness, how this affects and impacts and potentially helps solve problems for admissions, academic advising, career counseling, and deploying a combination of self-discovery and career assessments. So to that end, this webinar has been structured on 3 topical areas. So what we're really laying this out as a conversation, and everyone who is a participant today will have an opportunity to ask a question, if you like, in the design feature. And we see this as an ongoing opportunity to really help you solve problems. So I couldn't be more delighted to kick things off today by giving just a super brief introduction of the panelists who are joining me for this call. So you can see them right now on your screen. Our first speaker is Mike Nowicki. He's the Director of Educational Opportunity Center at the Community College of Denver. Brenda McCafferty is also with us. She is an outreach manager for ECMC. Brian Donnelly is a career counselor for Phi Beta Kappa and an advisor at Butte College. And Chris Massey is the general manager for the Myers-Briggs company. So we're going to dive right into the first topic as we go to the next slide. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the key challenges. And we're going to begin with Mike. So Mike, would love to hear a little bit, thinking about design thinking and empathy, a little bit about your role and personal connection to this work. And then let's hear a little bit about how you see obstacles to engagement and specifically the sense of belonging.
Yeah, thank you, Becky, and welcome to everybody on the webinar today. Again, I work with a college access program through the Department of Ed's TRIO grants called Educational Opportunity Center. And one of our core functions is to help low-income, first-generation prospective students identify career and academic pathways. And I'm just personally, I'm really passionate about motivating and encouraging and giving tools and guidance to students as they begin their academic journeys. You know, so often we don't give students the time or place in higher education to really reflect on their possibilities, you know, what options are out there for them. So any tool or resource or learning environment that I can help create to facilitate this, I get really super excited about. So I guess just kind of talking really briefly about some of the obstacles we have at our institution. CCD, Community College of Denver, we have about 9,000 in our head count, 54% minority serving, and about 64% of our student body is first generation. You know, one of the challenges that we have is just college readiness in general. How are we supporting students who need remediation? And we've really been moving to a more supplemental instruction model as opposed to having students take a bunch of remedial classes before they enter college level. And I think this really helps shift the mindset from sort of more deficit to strengths-based, letting students know that they can start off in college level classes with support, you know, around that, and just engagement at our institution. You know, most of our student interaction happens in the classroom. So how do we become more intentional about student affairs programming and how we help create a sense of belonging and connection to our institution? And lack of family support or student self-efficacy, we see that a lot. You know, especially at students and how they operate and try to navigate the ins and outs of our college going process. Sort of the imposter syndrome kind of comes to mind with that. And as our institution sort of moves forward with guided pathways, you know, how are we really assessing our enrollment and support programming and looking at how we can be more relational and less transactional?
Mike, that's great. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about fast facts about community colleges, in that we do have a very diverse demographic of students. So it's wonderful to hear about the work that you're doing. Let's turn to Brian for a minute. Brian, why don't you share with us a little bit about your role and personal connection? And you've faced a lot of unique challenges that we see as we look at community colleges and a demographic of us serving more women, more people of color, more people with socioeconomic barriers. How do you tackle this? I understand you're a career counselor for 10,000 students, so that's quite a challenge to tackle. So share with us a little bit about the landscape yourself and some key challenges.
Hi everyone, Brian Donnelly. I'm the career counselor at Butte College, and yes, I'm the only one of 10,000. So when I started 6 years ago, it was a bit daunting because my bandwidth can only, So I really before that I taught career and life planning, by the way, for about 8 years, and then I have a background with county systems as well in departments of employment and social services, specifically for Butte County. So I've really have been in this world for a long time, the career development world, and really helping clients or students really kind of figure out who they are and what they want and how to get there. And I think there's challenges in all three of those steps, but especially navigating within a system that wasn't necessarily really created for them. So I think generally I would at least speak upon California community colleges that it was their huge focus for the past decades have really been focused on just open access, because everybody who applies gets in, with hundreds of choices that are just really not well organized upon entry for a student. So this design was really successful, increasing opportunities for students of all backgrounds to attend college. But unfortunately, due to this model, colleges design themselves in a way that requires students to navigate a really confusing kind of cafeteria-style menu of choices with very little guidance. So many of these students have a hard time figuring out what they want to do, what courses to take, and how they can connect their academic pathways with actual career pathways. So therefore, a lot of our students, most of our students really take more units than they need. And in many cases, students drop out because they're frustrated or discouraged. And luckily, at least in California, we're adopting guided pathways as well. And also a California Assembly Bill 705 passed to an efforts to reduce remediation, which I'll get into a little bit later. And also its funding formula, California Community College's funding formula has changed. For a long time, it was purely just based on FTEs, which is just we gain apportionment based on enrollment. And now the funding formula has shifted to really focus on being awarded for, if you will, for retention, degree attainment, transfer, and employment rates as well. So kind of piggyback off of Mike in terms of engagement, there's, at least at our college, we're rural and we're in the middle of nowhere, and there's generally a lack of a sense of a belonging that students have. We have, I want to say, around 90% of our students are eligible for financial aid. Most of them are, at least probably about 50% are first-generation college students, and they often need to work to supplement, just to live, because the financial aid doesn't usually cover enough. So they really don't have the time or energy or the outreach to explore careers in a really meaningful way by doing internships, and oftentimes those are unpaid, job shadows, joining campus clubs, etc. So, and I'm glad that you hit on the equity issue, because of course our college is now more focused on equity and putting more resources into career exploration and planning, which I'll explain a little bit later. But when it comes to, on this topic, when it comes to enrollment, persistence, and achievement, there is an apparent equity issue where certain student populations consistently experience lower outcomes compared to the total student population.
Yeah, that's great, and I'm glad you brought that up. And as you were speaking, I was wondering if, before we move on to Brenda, you might talk a little bit about how your recruiters use the Viva Novice tool. I just wanted to share with everyone on the call. Yeah, that's how you wanted to share with everyone on the conference, which was in Newport Beach. We had over 500 people there. So as I was sitting in the airport, I actually took the assessment myself, somebody who has been working obviously for a long time, but I found it to be insightful. So maybe just in a quick minute, share with us a little bit about how your recruiters in California are using the tool.
Well, I can only speak for my college, so I feel that Vita Navis is a very, and by the way, it's in Spanish too. You could convert it to a Spanish version of Vita Navis. It quickly engages the students and it links their interest. It's a very quick assessment, although I hear it's just as valid and reliable as the full-length version of the Strong, and it quickly links their interest with our degree programs and highlights the degree programs, because we do have a plethora of offerings. So at least it narrows down and starts to pipeline the student to really narrow down to their top 5 choices where they could further investigate. I think the magic has happened less in recruitment, but more so in some of the other things that we're doing with Vita Navis, but I'll save that for later.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And I know what I keep hearing from colleges as I travel around the country is that students tend to do better at things that they're passionate about and that they like. So that's something I think that resonates. So Brenda McCafferty, let's talk a little bit. You're the outreach manager for ECMC. So share with us a little bit about your role with that organization, your personal connection, and how you see some of these tools really helping with persistence and retention.
Great. Thanks for having me, Becky. I'm a little bit unique on this panel because we actually work with 52 different institutions, and 46 of those are working closely with Vita Navis. So I've had the pleasure of working with Chris over 3 years now as the vendor liaison for Project Success and Vita Navis, but also as an outreach manager where I work directly with the schools. So that said, we actually Project Success was developed a few years ago, and we just finished the first 3 years of the program that was designed by the Department of Education to increase graduation rates, increase retention rates, lower cohort default rates, of course, and then build institutional capacity. And one question that often came up is, now how is this really building institutional capacity? But the resource it brings to advisors, whether it's academic, admissions, career counselors, whatever it may be, it truly builds institutional capacity. It saves the staff so much time while doing a much better job counseling their students. So we actually work with 10 schools in 10 states and the District of Columbia, and we're expecting to work with Vita Navis with over 100 schools beginning in 2020. So we're really excited about the partnership and the results that we've seen so far. But I'll share a little bit about that more later as well. But in 2019, NSC Research Center reported the first year persistence and retention rates for fall 2017. And I think it's important to realize that there was 3.5 million students who were enrolled in college for the first time during the cohort of fall 2017. And their persistence rate to fall of 2018 was 73.8%. But Project Success, we work with minority serving institutions. So even though persistence overall, first-time students has increased like 2.2% between 2009 and 2017, when we look at the cohort of the Hispanic students, persistent rate is only 59.5, and Black students is only 52.1. But when you look at just the community college for Black students, the persistent rate drops to 42%. So Project Success works with this cohort of schools, and the retention rates were found to be even lower for the 52 schools that we were assigned and that we're currently working with. We're very passionate about assisting all students, but especially the minority serving institutions because they're so under-resourced. And many of them immediately adopted Vita Navis because of the immediate, well, number one, the quick onboarding, and then the immediate results that were found.
That's excellent. And I think drilling down into the data really brings the opportunity to life. So let's switch to you, Chris Mackey. You're the general manager for Myers-Briggs Company, the lab. So share with us a little bit about your role working with the company, a little bit of your personal story, and talk with us a bit about scaling the counseling function when resources are very limited, as Brenda and the others had mentioned.
Okay, thanks, Becky. And I was thinking a little bit about my personal connection to my current work, and I remembered actually my dad. It starts our historical familial connection to the Myers-Briggs Company started with my dad in the Naval Academy. He was there as a cadet and was very, very unhappy his first year. And what he did is he went to the counseling center and he took some sort of what he called a test. And next thing he knew, that test told him that Naval Academy wasn't right for him and he ought to study art. So he became an art student at Rutgers, ended up meeting my mom, and then went on to study architecture at the University of Utah. So decades later, when I was talking to him about my work at the Myers-Briggs Company and our work with the strong interest inventory and aligning student interests with what the right fit job is for them, I mentioned this thing called the strong interest inventory. He told me all about this. So I naturally reproached him and said, Dad, why didn't you tell me about this? Because I was certainly a wanderer for many years. And I think that's why the work that we do at the Innovation Labs and at the Myers-Briggs Company is so important to me, because I think it's personally relevant to most people, and we can all understand that period of meandering, wandering, not understanding where the right place for us is in the world. And our work can help accelerate students to find the course of study that can lead them to achieving their dreams. So I think your second question was about counseling and kind of what the Vita Navis platform does. I would say at the Innovation Labs at the Myers-Briggs Company, our biggest innovation is potentially our model of distributing assessments. Generally, in the past, assessments have been a one-on-one experience between a practitioner and a student. A trained practitioner interprets a PDF report and dives in deeply into the assessment and what it means, and has an interactive conversation with the student. And you can understand that that's very expensive for schools to provide to all students. So our goal at the labs is to provide unlimited, unfettered access to the insights that assessments provide, specifically to those underserved and underrepresented populations that have not had that type of insight before. A lot of times it's been reserved for students that either have enough money or just happen upon our assessments and the value that they provide. I think the other thing that we seek to do in helping to scale human interaction is to provide students with enough insight to go into those human interactions to get past the question of, I don't know. Like, what do you want to do? I don't know. I have no idea. And then, a lot of time with trusted advisors at the community college is wasted on that I don't know question. And we also have developed self-administrable and self-interpretable assessments that can then be used by non-traditional users of our assessments, like teachers, academic advisors, admissions counselors, to help lighten the load of the counseling staff. And I think Brian has a lot of great examples of that, and Mike also, how you can address a lot of students at one time. Finally, I think that what we've sought to do is provide a framework for decision making, so that we don't tell students what to do, rather than we dive deep into themselves and increase their self-awareness so they can start to make informed and intentional decisions about their future. And we've seen that 89% of the students surveyed on our platform say that they feel better equipped to make decisions about career and education. And what that really spurs them to do is take action in the world. And I think that's what we want folks to do. So I hope that answers your question.
Totally does. And it, you can see too, especially for the followers of entrepreneurial mindset, how empowering that can be. So let's move now to talking about a second topic, which is really the importance of students' and interests, how they're supported. So Brenda, let's start with you. I think insight a moment ago in the discussion, but tell us how you use these tools and the platform to impact student success, because that's really the name of the game on a lot of different levels.
Sorry, forgot to unmute. My apologies, please. Well, we knew we had a really big task ahead of us when we were selected to be a part of the groundbreaking program that we're a part of. And we knew that we also needed to work with the best. And that's when Chris and Vita Navis came out, and we totally embraced everything he had to offer. And we found that his passion for helping the minority serving institutions at under-resourced schools actually took everything to the next level. And one reason that it worked so well so quickly is the seamless implementation. They offer impeccable customer service. And I always have to give kudos to Daniel, a person on their team, because he provides data that schools may request before they even know to request it. And they really set the benchmark high for all the vendors that we work with. But when we deployed Vita Navis, within the first year, we measured first-time students on a college campus. So this is a little bit out of the box. It wasn't first-time students. It wasn't first-time, full-time that we think about when we think about IPEDS data, but we actually tracked the first time a student was enrolled in one of our schools. And that's because a lot of the schools, that's where they implemented Vita Navis. They tried to get them when they were coming in the door to see how we could track and make a difference. And we actually saw the persistence rate of those students persist over 60% that first full year. And then I checked data this afternoon, and for the second year, those same cohort of students have persisted to the second year at 53.96%. So we're just ecstatic, and those are persistent numbers measuring those students on a campus that took Vita Navis and participated in the platform versus those on those same college campuses that did not take the time to go through the assessments. So I think that's remarkable. It shows the strengths, and I could go on and on about the different ways that schools are using it.
Right, and Brenda, also, that also ties into a Pell issue as well. My years working at the college, it broke my heart, the number of students that would blow through all their Pell support, end up with loans and debts when they fail to persist. So I think there's an equity kind of celebration in that too. So Brian, let's turn to you for a second and focus in on academic advising. It's not lost on me that you're responsible for 10,000 students, so you have a lot on your plate. So tell us about how you use the platform to support advisors when you're looking at academic career counseling and certainly pathways.
Sure. I'll give you a little bit of background first, because the passing of California Assembly Bill 705 was pretty important. We had to implement it last year, and this bill really aims to have all California community college students to complete college-level English and math within their first year, and ultimately eliminates any placement testing. So there was an entire department whose primary function was to administer these math and English assessment tests for placement purposes. So really the department faced a dilemma to quickly reinvent themselves or no longer exist. So luckily, the assessment department used to go to local high schools to administer these math and English assessments to incoming seniors in the spring. And we were able to implant the CAP tool, which I'll explain in a minute, along with Vita Navis. So instead, they're administering Vita Navis and our career and academic profile tool in a workshop environment.
Maybe just in a quick.
So it's a lot of visits, and it's worked out quite well. The CAP tool is really replaces the math and English assessment. It's where students enter their academic goals and get to see the recommended math and English courses to take their first semester based upon their major they selected in the tool and the high school grades that they entered into the tool. So all incoming students are required to complete this CAP tool. And we really felt like Vita Navis paired very well with it because these high school workshops, provide, the students are provided with an onboarding experience that helps them first identify a program of study, define their goals through Vita Navis, and then we switch to the CAP tool so they determine their best English and math course options for their pathway within the CAP tool. And then when they come to us for an in-person orientation on our campus, then the advisors and any other support service staff can see their academic goal, the recommended math and English courses to take, and have those discussions. And they also have access to the Vita Navis results as well. But Vita Navis is also being used in a lot of other areas, like all our first-year experience courses. I developed a dual enrollment career and life planning program where a number of high schools are, there are college career and life planning courses that we offer that are taking place on the high school campuses. Because it's really, right now we're in the phase of really focusing in on having students really explore and at least somewhat make up their minds as soon as possible. So really,
share with us a little bit about how
more likely to complete on time if they identify a major early on. So we really have been focusing on more of like the early outreach part of it. But counseling's been great. Because of the guided pathways model that we've been following, career counseling, which is just really me, along with general counseling and advising, has been working together to redesign onboarding systems and information to make it easier for students to find their path, know their academic requirements via these maps that we're making, and connecting to college degree offerings with career pathways. So Vita Navis fits into a lot of places. So.
That's great, and love what you said about that. Oh, it did, and thank you for noting the mapping because that's important. And Mike, as we turn to you, really the name of the game is student empowerment, and we speak about that in the NACCE world as agency and encouraging faculty to flip classrooms and really put students in charge of their destiny. So talk to us a little bit about student empowerment, passion, strength, and personality. What are the linkages between strength, interest, and empowerment? Maybe you could give us an example or two from your experience.
Yeah, sure, that would be great. From my perspective, starting up with having students kind of learn more about themselves and better, identify their interests really helps them connects them to the why. Why am I here? Why is this relevant to me in my future? So many times I'm working with students, they've kind of been pushed to go to college, and their family or their high school counselors are pushing them, but they really haven't necessarily bought into to why am I here? Why is this relevant to me in my future? So that's one of the reasons our institutions did sort of
in California
orientation onboarding experience was to really give an opportunity for students to reflect more about themselves, more about their interests, and really create a space for generating that answer to, why am I here? Why is this relevant? So what we've done at CCD is all of our new students coming in go through our onboarding orientation experience where we start off giving them the Vita Navis tool, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, in a little bit here. But after we implemented Vita Navis in our orientation, students, we saw kind of an immediate shift in how students experience orientation. They get really excited after taking assessment. They're talking to their, we kind of have them meet in an assembly room, and they're talking to their neighbor about the results. And this sort of was a great springboard to have them break out a different pathway groups and have even more discussion during the student orientation. So ultimately we structured the experience. We give them basically an hour to to not only take the assessment, but to kind of have a facilitated discussion about the results, how they connect to different academic pathways at CCD, and we encourage them to sort of use the tool to keep exploring different occupational matches. I was at a focus group a little while ago after we implemented Butte Navis, and it was a focus group for our institution. We were going through a new strategic plan, and we were sort of doing a strengths and weaknesses session. And one of the students in that focus group really highlighted the strength of what we were doing at CCD by starting off doing some career exploration work. And he really felt that the results were insightful and affirming to him. So, that was sort of a real warm fuzzy for me. It's always kind of cool when you help develop and implement something and you see that there's a positive result happening. And it really also resonated with me because I've seen at our new student orientations, students really feel excited and energized about the results and their interests, and they really sort of affirm for them that they're sort of on that some of the apprehensions that they might have. It gives them more confidence in their choices and decisions, and I think that's been sort of encapsulate the student experience. That's a lot of what we've seen.
So as we switch to topic 3, let's, Mike, talk a little bit more from you about the development of the CCD Opportunity Center. Maybe just share with us a little bit about the research findings.
Yeah, so what we did at CCD, just kind of what I was talking about, is we developed this onboarding experience for students where we spend about an hour with them. They start off by taking the assessment. We developed a brochure that sort of helps to kind of create a visual and help them connect how their themes and their career interests connect to the academic pathways we have at CCD. And we also developed a presentation where we spend a little bit more time going into their themes, just to give them some more context of what that means for them. Yeah, and here's the visual here. So sort of how we design this is the realistic, investigative, artistic rows sort of bleed into the different academic pathways, and then we on the right we sort of show them all the different programming that we have at CCD, the pathways and different academic programs, and sort of as a header at the top of those, we identify the interests that kind of show up in those pathways. Another thing we did too at orientation was after they started to learn more about the results, they talk to their fellow classmates, they meet an advisor in a sort of a group session, and they identify a pathway and have a conversation with that advisor to sort of confirm if this pathway is a good fit for them or not. So one of the more immediate outcomes that we've had implementing Butte Navis is that a lot of our students that were sort of picking general degree declarations like Associate of General Studies or selecting undeclared, we reduced that from
Speak for my college.
After we implemented Butte Navis. And we've had about close to 5,000 students actually take the assessment at this point. And so just kind of what Brian was talking about, that sort of gives us an opportunity to have further engagement with the tool, not only in our further first-year experience programming, but just our advising team as well. I think there's a quote I think I just want to mention really quickly from the book Redesigning America's Community Colleges. I'm sure a lot of people on the webinar have read that book. But the quote is, theories of advising suggest that goal exploration sessions auto-unfold as a sustained multi-phase process. Advisors should begin by guiding students through an exploration of their own skills and interests, followed by a structured investigation into various occupations and professional career areas, and then help students draw connections between their new self-understanding and their developing knowledge of various careers. So I just thought that quote was really relevant to the discussion today, and how I really feel like Butte Navis is a tool to really help advisors further those meaningful career conversations, help students better identify goals, and sort of get them to feel confident in their decisions, much quicker than we had the ability to do before.
And
Yeah,
I just, Becky, this is Chris. I just wanted to throw in there too, one of the statistics that we've been tracking around Community College of Denver's success with the program, where they bring in 100 students into a room that are undecided. At the end of that, 95% plus are decided, but they've been able to move their undecided numbers from 25% of the student population down to less than 1%, which is a huge driver of student persistence and engagement. Choosing a major that you're actually committed to and you've made the decision on your own.
And that's amazing. And I think having such a large 5,000 person study is great. It would be interesting to dive deeper into that maybe at another time. Great. So Brian, let's transition to you here and get back to some of the best practices that you've seen with CAP and student educational plans. I understand you've had some really good success on some of your initiatives as well.
Yeah, yes, we have. Similar to Mike, ours is around 90% or so have claimed that Vita Navis has helped them align their interest with programs and deciding on a major. But we expanded it too because it's very helpful for if they're still on the fence. Most often they still know their meta major. Most people know what I'm talking about, aka like a community of interest, if you will. So it's very helpful after Vita Navis and entering their goal into the CAP tool where counselors could have some talking points if the student has still some questions or is still kind of on the fence between two, because it's very powerful at the least if they're undecided. Most often they at least know the area, the general meta major area, whether it's healthcare or business, if you will, or social behavioral sciences. So it has been very helpful. I'm more curious to see like the longitudinal actual like real data on let's say following these students, and not just the retention rate, but how many of them end up changing their majors or taking excess units. So that's really to come, because we only implemented this on a full scale last year, where we went out to about 36 area high schools. That's about a little more than 2,000 students that completed Vita Navis and our career and academic profile tool in a workshop setting. That was right at every high school in our area. And I want to give a little props to Mike, because the Vita Navis portion of our workshop is modeled after the Community College of Denver's Chart Your Path brochure, by the way. We loved it so much. And so thank you, Mike.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. And that's, part of the learning and sharing that at the beginning of the webinar we talked about with community of practice. That's what we want to encourage is colleges to share and learn from each other. The other piece, as we get to Brenda here to get a little bit from her, is, thinking through as well that, going to have multiple careers. And when I did the assessment, as I was telling you in the airport, I thought it was interesting because I could drill down and see many different types of careers that would align with my interests. So that was just one thing I thought was kind of cool. But Brenda, let's kind of round this out so we have a few minutes left for questions, and speak a little bit about assessment deployment best practices. And if you're still on mute like I was, you can unmute yourself. But I know in terms of, there you are. Okay, thank you. So I know you've done some good work on freshman orientation. So just share with us a bit about that.
Yeah, and I want to give kudos to Mike as well. With Project Success, we've shared his handout and brochure of his program, and schools are just amazed at what a great job that piece is. So we have used the platform in so many different ways. You can only imagine with 46 different institutions. Everyone is creative, they take, they own, they twist, and then they share. But we've had a lot use the freshman and transfer orientation to actually be the tool where they push out the first assessment available to students. And I think transfer students is a population that sometimes gets overlooked. They have very unique schedules, being the non-traditional students often that I encourage schools to make sure they include that population, the adult learners also. And then we have institutions that's actually built it into the freshman 101 classes, which I think is very clever. And it's one of those things that instead of all the counseling falling on, as Brian can speak to, under-resourced counselors, it lets the faculty build in some of that. And we found that the faculty that have actually taken part into the classes and are actually seeing some of the results have really bought into the ownership that this is not a platform that's just for certain populations of students. It literally is so diverse, it can fit in every department on campus. We have schools that are building it into juniors and seniors in high schools because that helps students make the decisions and explore before they actually get onto the college campus and feel they need to select a major very quickly. And then we've actually had other schools that they built the platform and the assessment into their withdrawal process. And I have 3 schools that have great success stories where this has happened. But some of the schools even build it into part of their early alert system. It's where they have that opportunity to reach out to students that are struggling and say, wait a minute, let's catch these students as early as possible. Let's actually bring them in.
It quickly engages
them, but while we have them in front of us, administer the assessment and see what we can do to make a difference in these students and keep them from just disappearing off college campuses. That tends to be a large issue. The students that are not connected, they just disappear. They don't necessarily always go through the withdrawal process. So if you're allow me to indulge just another minute or two, I'd love to give you one example of how cool I think this actually works when it's built into the withdrawal process. Do we have a minute?
Oh, yes, you do. Yes, please.
Well, there's this on one of our institutions, we had the director of the Student Success Center actually reach out because she was ecstatic. She had already believed in the platform. She'd administered, she had counseled one-on-one and really made a difference. But it was usually her advisors and counselors taking students through the process. But this particular day, they were away at a training. So she actually spoke to this young lady who came in tears. And she was a nursing student, and they have a very strong nursing program at that institution. And
is the students, and it links.
You know, darling, I know you're upset, but just give me 5 minutes and let's take this assessment. So she ran through it, and then she took a few minutes to review it before she started digging in, took the conversation with the young lady. And her first question was, well, I see you have some unique interest here, and you have strengths in sciences, but why nursing? You know, that's a very specific field, and you don't necessarily have a social aspect that we often think of that nurses need. And she said, well, my mom's a nurse, my grandmother's a nurse, I've got 3 aunts that's nurses, and they just all really felt like it's something that the family's gifted to do, and they just, since they're helping me out, I felt obligated to major in nursing. And you know, a lot of students feel that way. So as she kept talking, and she said literally it was less than like a 10-15 minute conversation with this young lady, but she shared her true passion was with forensic science. And that institution actually had a great program, but the girl was so focused on just nursing and just what she needed to do to get in and out. But she called over the director of the Student Success Center, called over. The department chair was actually in, and he met the young lady, and they had a great discussion. She wound up changing her major instead of dropping out that day, and she actually graduated and has a job, and the job was waiting on her, May of 2019. And that's the true success stories. I love when it's personal and you have just that one-on-one. Statistics are awesome, but at the end of the day, if it makes a difference in one student's life, it's worth the effort it takes. And with this platform, the effort is so minimal.
And that's wonderful, and I think that's why we all do the work that we do. So thank you for sharing that. I want to turn it back to Chris Mackey just for a moment to see if he might want to make just a couple quick closing comments before we take a couple of questions and answers.
You know, Becky, one thing that comes to mind as a lot of the panelists mentioned statistics and outcomes that I wanted to mention is that our platform, Vita Navis, was built to be a longitudinal research platform. And so even after students graduate or they move on to employment, schools can conduct research with willing participants and can have a connection with those students or, you know, those employees, graduates over time. So we're starting to do that sort of collaboration, in particular with the University of San Diego and other institutes of higher education. But I will mention one longitudinal study that was conducted outside of our platform by Dr. Rounds and Dr. Sue. They looked at interest alignment as a driver of career success outcomes over a population of 400,000 students and then employees. And I'm forgetting the exact time frame, but if folks are interested, we can point you to the study and the meta-analysis. But what they found is that interest alignment, you know, more than personality, was highly correlated with things like degree completion, college persistence, occupational prestige. And then interestingly enough, and our friends at Financial,
although it's
are particularly interested in this, it had an outsized correlation with income attainment. So it makes sense, right? If you're interested in things, you really dig in, you become expert, but it had an outsized, again, effect on income attainment as well as those other career success outcomes. And I just think it's interesting over time as we work with a lot more schools, the research and longitudinal research in particular that we're starting to see. So keep your eyes out for that.
That's excellent. And I think there's just been so many thought-provoking things, even hearing all of you and digging into more of the research. So I know we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to call out to Leah Deppert, who is Macy's Director of Marketing Communication. Maybe if you had, we probably have time at least for one or two questions, and then of course we can always share answers via email or some other written format. So Leah, do you want to share a little bit about maybe some of the questions that have come through?
Sure, thanks, Becky. And just as a reminder, if you do have questions, you can submit those via the questions feature on your GoToWebinar dashboard. So one of the first questions came from Melissa, and she asked, when do you give the onboarding assessment during the high school day?
Oh, this must be for me. I hear it's just as valid and reliable. Well, the infrastructure was already there, so we were very blessed. We just unplugged the math and English assessment and plugged in Vita Navis along with the CAP tool. So it was a lot of coordination that was already in place and that's still going on with counselors. So it would just be a day that wouldn't interfere with sports or other activities. And it would be during the regular school day. Typically, I've noticed that it was towards the end of the day, the visits that I did. So I didn't set up the planning of that though, by the way. But it was they always found us a computer lab to use, and sometimes high schools require multiple visits, larger high schools, because there might be a lab that only fits 30 students, let's say. And so we had to maybe go to that high school 3 times or have 3 separate sessions.
And I can comment on that as well. The super strong assessment itself takes less than 10 minutes generally to register with Vita Navis and then take the assessment and get the insights. And what we've seen at community colleges and high schools is that the technology equity gap when it comes to smartphones in particular is very thin, slim. So, you know, most students can take the assessment on their smartphone or an available computer, or we've seen high schools and community colleges provide iPads. But because it's so easy to use, so quick to set up, and only takes 10 minutes, it's pretty flexible as to when the assessment is taken.
Okay, excellent. Hope that answered your question, Melissa. The next question came from William, and he asked, if students complete the assessment at orientation, aren't they already enrolled in a program? Do many make changes after taking the assessment?
Yeah, I think that's that's for me. Excuse me. Students do have to pick a major coming in, but what we were finding is that there was a lot of program requests that semester that they matriculated, and so we saw an opportunity to sort of be more intentional and actually just modify our orientation so that students really make an official declaration of their major or their program right after they take the assessment and go through the onboarding experience and meet briefly with their advisor. And so, like I said, some of the results we've seen is that students are changing their majors less. We haven't had all the data we need to sort of dig in deeper, but so far the results are promising.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Our next question came from Constance. She asked, do you have to be an MBTI practitioner to interpret the assessment
program?
No, we've designed the assessments to be self-interpretable and self-administrable, and easy to use and easy for teachers, academic advisors, admissions folks to help students understand. So it doesn't require the same level of interpretation that the MBTI does. But we do offer training around the platform and how to best implement the platform Vita Navis within your existing student success programs, or even ways to improve those through including the platform in those processes. So we do offer sort of a traditional Vita Navis and super strong certification program.
Excellent. All right, another question came from Carrie. She asked, what's the reliability and validity of the Super Strong?
So this is Chris again. We've got a technical brief that we can send you where we outline the research that we did. We spent a lot of time and treasure on creating the Super Strong assessment to make it highly accurate in terms of delivering very similar results to the Strong Interest Inventory. The scoring technique is pretty novel in the psychometric world, but we do constantly calibrate the assessment in order to continue to maintain that high level of validity, reliability, and accuracy, and we document that as well. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and find the various technical briefs around the Super Strong. And we also use the California Psychological Inventory, which is in its original form.
Okay, excellent.
That's great. And I think due to timing, I don't want to run too far over, but Leah, I understand we probably have a great number of questions. So we're going to meet as a team and figure out how to respond to every one and share that. I believe we have email addresses for people. But perhaps what we can do with just a minute that we have left is to just share a couple of things with people about next steps. Because at NACCE, we are in this for the long haul, and appreciate the opportunity for you all to spend time with us. So there will be an opportunity for you to explore the platform. So that information will be coming to everyone. I shared with you personally, again, it took me 10 minutes to do it, and it was fun, and it was very informative. So I'd encourage you to do that. So you'll be hearing more about that. And then I'd also like to just invite all of you who are NACCE members or who are interested to join us for two of our national convenings. The first one will be in June 3rd through the 5th. It's our Makeshift 2.0 conference, which focuses on entrepreneurship. It's both for colleges and universities and ecosystem partners. We also have K-12 folks involved. And then our national conference this year will be in Nashville, Tennessee. Yay! October 11th through the 14th. So, as we continue this conversation, we are going to be thinking intentionally about how those who want to learn more and connect, we can make opportunities for you to do that. So I also just a note that there are resources that Chris mentioned at the bottom of the page. So you can have access to Super Strong. So I think with that, I just want to thank everybody for their time. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you, and we will be sending along a recording and wish everybody a wonderful day. Thank you so much.